Why, hello! Fancy seeing you here. It's been a while. Welcome to the new and improved headlines where we look at major stories of the week. I'm Lee Treelan and we're kicking things off with highlights. Starting things off with sad news, past spiritual leader Datuk Abdul Aziz Nikmat passed away at the age of 84 on Thursday night at 9:45 p.m. at his home in Pulau Melaka. Next up, you may have read that the New York Times unravelled Malaysian investor Jho Low's luxury condo purchases in New York. We actually had one of the writers, Louise Story, telling us how she and her colleague Stephanie Saul had heard people say that a lot of units in high-end developments were purchased by foreigners. So if you want to catch that podcast, you can on bfm.my. And lastly, the news on everybody's minds, I think, the federal court dismissed Anwar's appeal on Tuesday, citing scientific and corroborative evidence and rejecting his claims of political conspiracy, thus maintaining his 5-year jail sentence, which he was moved to Sungai Buloh prison to serve out. And since that is kind of the big story, kind of the one that dominated headlines, that is the story that we will be looking at, starting off with the idea of the use of law to take down political opponents. So, if you've been within even sniffing distance of a Malaysian newspaper in the last 15 years or so, you might think that there was only one sodomy case in the history of Malaysia. But the truth is that between 2000 to 2013, there were 2,562 reports of sodomy in our country. Of that lot, from what we know, how many were successfully convicted? Well, surprise, surprise. And I need to talk a little bit about what the Sodomy Act actually is in the first place, because it's under Section 377 of the Penal Code in 42 former British colonies that basically criminalizes anal sex between men and other homosexual acts. Those British people, so uptight. And under this, now this is most interesting because we make a big deal about sodomy, we go on and on about how shocking it is and how it's splashed all over our papers. But, you know, oral sex. Had it, tried it, talked about it with your friends maybe, read about it. Has no one had this ever? Because it's also described, by the way, as carnal intercourse against the order of nature under the same section, or Section 377A, and it's illegal in Malaysia. If you've had it, you know, you could be actually carrying a maximum penalty of 20 years jail and whipping. So my question then is Anwar the only person in Malaysia who has ever engaged in anal sex or in gay acts? Or has no one in our country ever had oral sex? Because let me remind you that these are all illegal under the same section. However, if that's what you believe or what you would like to believe, then other countries where you might fit right in is Iran, because its leader, Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, after a speech at Columbia University in September 2007, took questions from the crowd, and when one audience member asked why Iran executes its gay citizens, he responded, "In Iran, we don't have homosexuals like in your country. We don't have that. We just don't have this phenomenon. I don't know who's told you that we have it." So let me ask you this, right? Would you rather be considered corrupt or a pervert? And more importantly, for your leaders, would you rather be led by people who are corrupt or perverted? I really want to remind us all of this. You know, he was our finance minister and our deputy prime minister, and I think for those two positions, actually in any position in government really, it is a whole lot worse to be corrupt than it is to be a 1 or 2 time gay butt sex indulger. So just to draw an international comparison, it is everybody's favorite international political slut. Know who I'm talking about? Say it with me. It's Silvio Berlusconi, former Prime Minister of Italy, whose luck finally ran out when he was convicted of tax fraud in 2013, because guess what, friends? The tax man comes for all of us in the end. So let me remind you, he had a whole bunch of things. Sexual misconduct, all sorts, tax, fraud, bribery, just stack it up. And in the end, he was sentenced to 4 years in prison, ejected from his seat in the Senate. 4 years, I say that, but really it's a year of community service, because you're old, man. And that's what happens in other countries. In the end, thankfully, their politicians are caught for tax fraud. They're brought up on charges of embezzlement. They're punished, you know, for doing those things, for fooling around with people's money, not necessarily for what they do in their private time, even if that private time is really kind of gross. So, we can navel gaze, we can twiddle our thumbs, we can bemoan the state of affairs, but really what most of us want more than anything is to look into a crystal ball and see what's going to happen now. And you could argue, I think, you could make a pretty strong argument actually, that Anwar is perhaps more effective in jail as a figurehead, as he's been for the party for a long time. He is, after all, now more than ever, a martyr. But the question is, what do we want Pakatan to do with this? You know, do we want them to focus on this? Do we want them to prove that they can lead the states that they have as well as our country overall? These are questions that I don't think we're in a position to answer just yet, but I'm curious about what you think, because I don't know. And that is it from me on this very first episode of Headlines. We're landing with a bang, mostly thanks to the news. If you have any comments for us, please leave them in the box below. You know the drill. And do subscribe to video.bfm.my for more videos like this. Thank you for watching.